just want to say
Hey, I put a lip gloss.
amazing. Oh my God. We're live. Hi, Priscilla. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. So good to see you.
You too. Oh my God. Okay, so let's start with I feel like first of all, we probably want to address the LA fire. I feel so
I
bad
know.
for everyone who is in the LA area.
Yeah, I know we spoke about that. And obviously, our firm is deeply rooted in LA. And so our hearts are very heavy at the moment. Uh, so much of our community has been impacted and by the wildfires. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, I'm sure every one of us, also even listening, have someone that has been impacted. And so our commitment to supporting the recovery is very much our focus through this time. And so I'm also happy to share with anyone any of the relief organizations or how we're helping to support any of the funding and contribution efforts that we're very close with. So I hope that we can continue to remain resilient and help to rebuild our community.
Totally. I feel like science is such a iconic firm in the LA area, and I feel like it's so crazy and sad to see like what's happening, and I'm glad that you guys are supporting the community. And I feel like I feel like the worst part is already gone, so I think we're only getting better from now on.
I hope so. I hope so. But yeah, it still remains heavy. So very, yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully we can rebuild soon.
for sure. Hi, Bot Sisters. Yes. Oh my God. Thank you for like saying that. Okay. So, to start the show, I would love for maybe we could start with, some of so I feel like you personally have a really interesting experience of getting into venture. And maybe we could start talking about like, you started your career at, as a, at the Mitsu Banking Corporation. So like, I mean, I cannot pronounce the whole name, but like, okay.
Sumitomo. Yeah.
So maybe,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I have a pretty untraditional, I guess, path to VC. So, I mean, initially, as I was growing up, I actually thought I was going to be a computer engineer. I wanted to be an engineer just like my father. And so I went to pre-engineering high school and quite great at math and sciences. And then very quickly realized I wanted to be in finance. And, my roots are in San Diego and Southern California. And I decided as a freshman, I wanted to be out in New York and I wanted to be in the center of finance and capital. And I had a couple internships while I was in college, my freshman and sophomore year. And then my junior year, I had studied abroad in Italy. That said, when I graduated, Sumitomo Mitsui hired me on as full-time. And so I was in their derivatives group, so structuring derivatives. So again, very different from what I'm doing today. And that was with Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, it was the second largest Japanese bank at the time. And I had spent time there. I was in asset management with Neuberger Berman, which was Lehman Brothers asset management arm as Lehman was collapsing. And then I was in hedge funds between New York and London. And so, again, very different from what I was doing. But I decided at that time I was going to go to business school. And that was really my shift into venture. So I launched a company. And that was with my boss at the time, which was a compliance enforcement, really a regulatory response program. And so that was sold to a compliance consultancy. I was in business school at the time and shifted into focus on sustainability. I had a skincare program, I had a skincare brand. I also spent time in the Middle East with social impact programs as well, which is very similar to what we are doing at Science Today. And a bit fast forward, I was investing with family offices into startups, and also in the Middle East when I was working with those social impact pro bono projects. These were large sovereigns that were pouring dollars into early stage startups such as Careem, which was the equivalent of Uber. And so again, very, very large dollars with small startups.
Mhm.
And prior to Science, I was at Anheuser-Busch, and I was with ZX Ventures, which was their venture arm. And I was focused on investing into, at the time, on tech, anything that would help their core business. So supply chain logistics, marketing, ad tech, handful of other types of businesses. But that was my first foray into venture, and I met Science. And it's, again, also very, very different from a traditional venture fund. And so I'm quite happy to be part of this journey with them.
Totally. I feel like, even at science, your journey is like, I feel like it's untraditional, which I felt like it was super fascinating. I would love to maybe we could dive into that. So like maybe we start with like, science is such an interesting organization because you guys have the venture studio as well as like the VC firm on its own. Maybe we could talk about, um, you know, science first. So since like Mike was a guest, so like I'm not sure like
Yeah.
if we have like the people who are here listen to the first episode, but I feel like Priscilla would be a great person to like address like the science part. And then like we could talk
Absolutely.
about I feel like you have the most interesting experience. So we'll dive into that.
Oh my gosh, amazing. So Mike Jones, who's one of the founders of Science, so we have four founders and my partners, and he was the first person that I met. So we were introduced through mutual friends, and within the first, and it was really at the time I was just exploring a move potentially to California, and I
Mhm,
just fell in love with Mike's story. He's amazing. He's at the time he was so family oriented, so personable, and
mhm,
just so humble.
mhm,
So I mean, you know his story, but essentially he is a serial entrepreneur. His first
mhm,
company was sold to AOL. So if you think back to AOL chatbots, chat rooms, his
mhm,
company was the one that was powering those chat rooms and ran AOL Instant Messenger and really just became a force within the TMT space. So media and technology. And he ran private capital. He
mhm,
was doing turnaround private
mhm,
structuring services
mhm,
at American Capital. And then Rupert Murdoch brought him into MySpace. So he was the CEO of MySpace
mhm,
at the time that Facebook was entering into the world. So it was a
mhm,
very, very different
mhm,
time. Obviously, he was part of the dot-com boom and had seen it. And he was also at the time one of the largest angel investors in LA.
mhm,
So very prolific name here in the LA community.
mhm,
And but Mike was looking at the business of MySpace and saying, can this business stand up to Facebook? And what was super interesting was that many people probably didn't know is that MySpace was a very, very large, bless you, it's a very large it's a very large organization globally. So he's managing, north of 1,000 employees, global offices, and each of those offices were then sold off into different pieces. And so when you think about Mike and really how he's formed science and the rest of the partnership are thinking about it from really this operational lens. How can we build companies? How can we help to scale them? But really, how can we operate them more efficiently? And so I think that's really the lens that Mike was thinking about. And he had mentioned he was one of the largest angel investors. And so he had seen it was Maker Studios that was sold off to Disney, Goodreads sold off to Amazon, a handful of these like large exits. And so across the team of our partnership, over $5 billion in exits,
mhm,
personally. And it's just incredible to see
mhm,
because you're also seeing, yes, these great exits, but then there are some, what about the ones that don't do well, right? You're
mhm,
getting maybe at minimum, you're just getting quarterly updates, and that's not really enough to understand what's going on with the business. And so,
mhm,
thinking about it from an operational lens, Mike was, as we were just starting science, this is again back in 2011, how can we actually work with a founder, help to scale them super quickly and really get them the outcome that all of us want, right? And these are billion-dollar exits. And let's not wait until the end where we're not asking for the help that we need. So
mhm,
at the end of the day, I think he and the rest of our partnership and on our entire team really want to make sure that we're super helpful in many ways. Like we all have complementary skill sets, complementary abilities, different networks. And so how can we unlock those to be helpful, not only to our entire team and partnership, but our entire portfolio? And so that's really the model is how can we get in there very early, help the founder identify an idea, help to scale them super quickly. And we're life cycle investors. So we want to be there all the way through to the exit and be helpful and even beyond in many cases if companies go IPO. So that's really us. And I'm so grateful to have been working with the team. I've been with the team for almost 7 years, I believe. And it's been just a wonderful journey. And again, very different because we have this operational studio
mhm,
of about 13 people. And he's Mike again is that visionary where he's brought in a team of operators again in these different expertise areas. So from marketing to finance to um, business development. And then we also have our fund to help propel the capital into those businesses. So super
Totally.
exciting.
For sure. And I want to like highlight some of your portfolios, Liquid Death, Dollar Shave Club,
Mhm.
DogVacay slash Rover. So there's a lot like billion-dollar companies in the portfolio. So maybe we could start with, I feel like since like science has like the help you to build kind of like studio model, and then there's the investment, and then maybe we could talk about like since like you have worked on some like flagship deals in the company like Liquid Death, maybe we could talk about how do you find these companies and what's the evaluation process, and like how does like kind of science help them to grow.
Yeah, no, it's the ones that you've highlighted are certainly our big marquee names. So,
Mhm,
and just to give the audience a sense, we focus on very distinct models, business
mhm,
models. So CPG, so consumer packaged goods,
mhm,
mobile media, and marketplaces. And again, that's just because
mhm,
that's our core expertise. Those are areas and industries that we know very well. I'd say business models, and it's really industry agnostic. So oftentimes, so we have Dollar Shave Club, which are razors, and
mhm,
Michael Dubin and his founders, they came into our offices, and we were deciding what we were going to do with these razors. And at the time, we started to see a movement. And I would say that there's something interesting in how we think about science. So,
mhm,
um, from a founder perspective, we're always thinking about uh, mission driven founders. Do
mhm,
we find these founders that are aligned with their vision? Do they look like the brand that they want to? Do they look and breathe the brand?
mhm,
And so those are some of the things that we look for. Are they tackling $1 billion issue? And so in the case of Dollar Shave Club, right, we were moving into e-commerce. And so there was an opportunity there with revolutionizing the subscription box model. And so that was quite new. Um, and then we start to see, are there environmental shifts? Are there external
mhm,
perspectives that are shaping how consumers are spending their money and where they're spending their time? And then, then do we also think about, are we the right group to help propel that
mhm,
company very quickly? And so those are things that we saw in terms of, is there a big market for us to go after? I think for us, we spend a lot of time with corporates. And so with Dollar Shave Club specifically, there was an opportunity there to disrupt Gillette's.
mhm,
And so we ultimately sold Dollar Shave Club to Unilever. And with DogVacay, we started to see the shift in pet ownership. And so that was very interesting for us. So we started DogVacay, which ultimately was acquired by Rover. Rover had its second exit to Blackstone for 2.4 billion. And again, pets seem to be, a growing space, and it continues to be a growing space. We even have a company now that's called Dog Drop, which during the
mhm,
pandemic um, stayed open, and also currently for the wildfires offered free services to house dogs
mhm,
for those that were displaced. And then with Liquid Death, there was something interesting. So I'll spend a little bit of time here. So they joined us in November of 2018. Again, that shift for us, I'd spent some time also in sustainability. And again, I used to work at Anheuser-Busch. A couple of things that overlap there. In the sustainability space, we started to see the ban in single-use plastics. So we knew that we wanted to do something in the sustainable realm. We didn't really know what that was. We didn't know at the time it was going to be water.
mhm,
And we started to see, even in Manhattan Beach, again, ban on single-use plastics. Um, Liquid Death, this was November 2018, and at the time they were going through Snapchat's accelerator. Many people didn't know that Snapchat had an accelerator.
mhm,
And they had a single can, which was it was a white can and 16.9 flow ounces, and it was their still water, and that was being canned out of Austria and being distributed out of a couple different distributors on the East Coast.
mhm,
And at the time, so we met Mike Cesario and J.R. Riggins, who are the original co-founders of the business. And again, Tatted really lived and breathed that brand. So I mentioned, from a founder perspective, is there someone there? Secondly, the economic and environmental shift into sustainability, removal of plastic. They
mhm,
had a canned vessel for water, which was very different from what we were seeing in terms of plastic water bottles we
mhm,
saw. And then on the pricier end, higher dollar value with Voss in glass. And so they were going through Snapchat's accelerator, and thinking we're a brand, we're going to build a brand, which they are. But at the end of the day, the product that they were selling is a CPG product. And so Evan Spiegel had introduced Mike Cesario to Peter Pham, one of our other partners and founders of Science, and looked at the business and said, this is it. I mean, you look at the can and it's a skull and it's super edgy. And, Peter just looked at it and he's like, I know what we can do with this. And I think that's as you start to spend time again with products, with founders, you kind of just have this gut instinct also. Is this something that we as a team can really get behind, and can we help to scale it? And do we think that this could be a big business? And again, it was just everything had aligned that we had already seen the ban of single-use plastic. So brought them into our studio. Again, it's working with our portfolio operators. James Hicks, who's also been with the firm since 2011, one of our managing directors that leads the studio, had worked super closely with getting the business off of the ground. And it was incredible. So we put our first initial dollars to bring them into D2C, so direct to consumer. They didn't have an online presence, and we put in our first dollars and we brought them into Amazon. Very quickly, it was 200K in revenue. And I think what was more telling for us were, and if you haven't seen them yet, I don't know if you've looked at their comments, but on Amazon and you start to see the customer reviews, and they were wild fan fiction stories. Like I walked through the forest, I drank liquid death, I started growing hair on my chest and screaming like or howling like a werewolf, things like that. So we were like, wow, these are, organic customer reviews, that there's something here. And so we started to see this consumer virality, and it was absolutely insane and beautiful. So that, I would say, is, again, one of the milestones that we saw from a VC, like a funding perspective. We're like, there's something here. We love the founders. We love the mission. We love the environmental impact that we'll have. We also love the metrics now that we're seeing. And so we started to get behind, and, part of our model again is, where do we plug in with a company? And so Peter and I have a very large network. Our entire team has a large network, but in terms of fundraising and business development, where we spent time. So my old team at Anheuser-Busch moved over to Live Nation. So Live Nation, as you know, is one of the largest entertainment providers and concert venues. And at the same time, so when I speak about the economic and environmental impacts, they also had a ban on plastics at their concert venues. So again, timing was just right. And so Live Nation then invested with us, and they became one of our largest marketing distribution arms for Liquid Death, and continued to be a great partner with us. So they've been with us all the way through the journey. And so that was, an incredible journey for us, because we brought them in, we saw this movement, we saw the founder alignment, we saw our network. We bring in strategic investors on behalf of the fund and also for the company. We like ones that will help propel them into that next inflection point. And we're very strategic about that for all of the rounds. And so Peter and I work closely on each of those. We also have 2 board seats with Liquid Death, and they remain, a very great portfolio company for us. And it's great to see them now. Like I said, we brought them in, they just had the 1 can. Still, they have flavored sparkling, iced teas, electrolyte powders. And then now we've just announced their new soda line. So we're super excited that we have a strong executive team behind them. And it's been a fun ride. And the last round that we did with them was this time last year, valued at 1.4 billion. And we brought in distributors around that table with us.
Totally. I feel like what's so iconic is literally this is water. So I'm not gonna I feel like it's seriously, I feel like to market something that exists for the past billions of years, it's insane to me. This is straight up just marketing and distribution and everything else but the product. Although the product itself is very amazing. Obviously it's designed for a reason. It's selling to people's psychology, or just how people want to feel when they're drinking the water. But on the other hand, it's wow, it's just water. So I'm so amazed by how big of a success Liquid Death is. So quickly want to shout out to the audience. Hi, Boss Sister, you're awesome. And Emmanuel, so CPG is consumer packaged goods. So yeah, I just want to answer the honest questions. But
Yeah, yeah. Consumer
yeah,
packaged goods. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, I want to. Okay, so since I feel like um recognizing the consumer goods that can really go the distance needs a lot of things. So for example, in your story about liquid death, there is, the packaging. So like people really resonate with it, the partners resonated with it, and the Snapchat founders resonating with it. And then the middle part is like, you guys help them get into the distribution channel. People will write fan fiction.
Mhm.
Basically, they have like a strong fan base, and that shows us like an indicator. And like also some like strong track record to sell at the beginning. So I wonder what is like some benchmarks for CPG goods to think about when it comes to like repeatability, just because I feel like if I want to buy like a one-off thing, that's super easy, but for me to like keep eating the same snack or like drinking the same water, it
Mhm.
probably takes a lot. And like I wonder, how do you guys think about the benchmark for repeatability? And then you also mentioned, well, I was also thinking about the unit economics, just because for water, you compare them with like the Voss water, which is like the glass thing. But
Mhm.
there is, I guess, like what is like a good unit economics in the CPG sector? Obviously, I'm sure product are different.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And we've spent a lot of time also when we were going into convenience stores. So where we sit for liquid death, right? It's not it sits in the middle. We're not obviously that high premium, but we're also not we're not a plastic water bottle. And so where we sit, we spent a lot of time in the C stores with 7-Eleven. So 7-Eleven was a big investor, and we actually ended
Mhm.
up bringing in one of the executives who led the deal over at 7-Eleven. She's now our chief strategy officer. And it's been interesting to think about products. You raised a couple different things. One is obviously the consumer authenticity. We need consumers to align with the product. And at the end of the day, consumers also know that they're buying with their values, they're buying what's true to them. And I think that reigns true. And so they need to align with that brand. Do they look at the brand and say, this is something that I want to actually drink and consume?
Mhm.
Secondly, in terms of pricing, I think we need to be conscious of what's sitting on the shelves. And so we did a couple different pilots to understand in terms of price, one, where it was positioned. And so what we did was we actually did a test with 7-Eleven where we put the cans and we had sensors and we put them up against the plastic water bottles. And you have sensors that you can pick out, oh, everybody is actually grabbing the liquid death
Mhm.
cans, in much higher volume than the other
Mhm.
products. So that was telling for us. That was a big metric. In terms of price point, there's a lot of testing that goes on in terms of what is the best price point. You also want to be competitive. You have to also know which products you're up against. And so for us, it was very similar that, we're not an energy drink, we're a better for you, healthy alternative beverage. And so I think for us, it's how can we stay competitive to that pricing? And so you have to just understand exactly which category you're playing in. And then in terms of customer repeatability, I think that's and that's where how do you keep your customers engaged? And
Mhm.
I think for us, we have a really strong marketing team at Liquid Death. I mean, the CEO itself, he lives and breathes the brand. And also we spend minimal dollars on marketing and ad spend, I think, which is also quite different. We have a very creative team. We also, again, have a handful of different ways that we engage with our community. And so we had we have merchandise drops. So you'll see from time to time different drops. We have different campaigns with partners. You'll see, and again, these partners are ones that are very closely tied to the brand.
Mhm.
And obviously, we're not paying them for it either. So that's also another difference with a lot of the CPG brands. We're quite cautious on making sure that we're not. And we spend little, we're very efficient with our capital. Not only at our fund, and we want to make sure that we employ that over into our portfolio companies and that they're trying to be efficient with their capital as well. And so a lot of it is organic content, as you've probably seen
Mhm.
as you're just building the brand. There were people getting tattoos of the Liquid Death skull, or someone had it on their head. People
Yeah.
had Liquid Death at their weddings,
Mhm.
and they were exchanging their vows with Liquid Death. And then, so I think there was this strong tie that resonated with the company. And I think that over time, it starts to extend in that network, and you start to see this ripple effect of, oh, I'm drinking it. Now my kids are drinking it. And it's also accessible because it's a non-alcoholic beverage. And so you now can get the entire family involved. It's not just for one consumer. And I think for us, it's how can we get that repeatability? I mean, obviously from an investor standpoint, we look at that, but we're also wanting to make sure that are we delivering a product that speaks to customers that they really like? And are we listening to those customers? And over time, we're also releasing new products that are innovative and super exciting that people are they want to see what's next. And I think that's what really gets us. And so we're super excited, and they've been doing so well. And more and more, there's just so much white space here in the US that I think that we still have, a ton of ways to make impact.
For sure. I definitely I feel like whenever someone tattoos something on something, you're
Yeah.
totally onto something. That's crazy. Quickly say to the audience, hi LinkedIn user. I I want to maybe chat a little bit more about we chat about the liquidness of the world, but you guys invest in pre.com. I thought that was
Mhm.
really interesting too, just because the last time you mentioned it's like a subscription based business. Because I think it's impossible to think about them and then partnering with some company that they have been partnered with, like Palantir. That's so interesting. Maybe we could talk about pre.com in general, and then talk about their business model and then their newest partnership.
Yeah, I think so. There's something interesting. Again, pray.com it's a faith-based app, and it's really in the media space for us. And that's kind of the mobile media place where it sits. And we started to see this movement. There's a really large faith community. And, around COVID, what was interesting, a lot of the mega churches were closing. And so a lot of people in the faith space were trying to find a community. How can we engage with our own community? How can we find support? And I mean, even in times like this, where we have tragedies, how can we go to our community and really connect with them and bond and find a common ground? And so I think for pray.com, they found a really niche way to connect with not only people in their own community, but even it's a global product. And so working with faith leaders to extend that and find ways to share their knowledge, especially when their organizations were closed on the ground. Something that the National Geographic also released, I think this is about a month ago, just the number of mega churches that are now also starting to pop up given the spanning geography. And so I think it's a global use. Also with AI, at one point, you have faith globally. And so how can we translate some of this content to many users around the world? And with AI, we're able to do that at a really low cost. So you can translate and into many different languages. And I think there's also another way for Palantir was really looking to focus on nonprofit organizations and ways that they can help to support that. And it was really through technology, and pray.com happened to be it. They also have a really strong community. They had a wrapped car for those that are into NASCAR. They had a wrapped pray.com car, which was really cool. And so we have a big presence there. And I think there's just the overlap and intersection across sports, media, faith, entertainment. There's something there. And again, we even saw it yesterday with the American US football teams, where you're taking a moment for something, for a tragedy that really bonds everybody here in the US, and it's taking time to just reflect. And pray.com also offers that type of community and that support. So, and that's just a way that I think is a nice linkage. So that's, we're super excited about pray.com and some of the activations that they've had, some of the strong partnerships in terms of corporates. iHeartRadio, they had a really strong partnership with Palantir. And so again, it's one of those, how can we think about something that's going to be a really, really large industry? How can we find other corporates that are also tied to this mission? And then again, the founders that are truly aligned with this vision. So
Totally. When I was working in venture, I actually studied Pray.com just because I was looking at the, not, I wouldn't not say equivalent, but like something similar in Asia. But like I wonder when you're thinking about this kind of app, I feel like one thing is how frequently people will go back to the app, but also like I guess like how did they even first like starting to get the significant of traction. I remember like I would go into like, church or even equivalent to ask if people would use this app. But how do you guys do diligence when it comes to at the beginning when they were not super obvious or there is like 1,000 praying app, but like how does this one stand out for you?
Yeah, no, in pray.com specifically, I think at the time, again, we had seen there's a strong faith movement in
Mhm,
terms of religion, and it's really
mhm,
non-denominational.
mhm,
And so I think for us, first and foremost, again, it goes back to, do they fit our business model? If someone's coming to us and they're, are they a CPG company? Are they mobile media? Are they a marketplace? And mobile media fit. Um, then there was what we started to see was, is there a big market for faith, and what does that even look like? And I think for us, where we started to see again is, are there legacy types of businesses that we can disrupt? Are there antiquated systems in place where people are going, at the time we saw, how are people congregating? It was in big churches, it was in person. We didn't really see any online interactions. And
mhm,
so for us, we saw there's an opportunity for us to actually go online. And then thirdly, so we started to see there's a big market. There was opportunity for us to play
mhm,
in the media and online. And then third, are there ways for us to partner with them and help to scale it? And I think we started to see all three of those. And if you haven't met Steve Gattina, who is the founder, I mean, he is prolific, and he's a wonderful speaker, and
mhm,
he has a personal connection and story as to why he's built the company that he did,
mhm,
and how it's given him the will to live, and for many others. And I think that's, again, when you start to see that, and you start to see that connection resonating with so many others, it's, how can I find an online community that can help to support me? And there are many other ways when we think about a media business. Again, this is from an investor standpoint, right? But when we're looking at, are there ways to monetize this business? There's so many ways in media, whether there's obviously ad revenue shares, there are subscription models, there's now these large partnership deals that they can do with corporates. And so we started to see this can actually be a quite large business.
mhm,
Um, and then now with the partnership with Palantir, that also just gave us just more validation. So we're also looking for, again, kind of thinking about the diligence process, like, is there external validation for us? With Liquid Death, we saw that, as a CPG company, we saw it with their sales, with their customer comments. With pray.com, you can start to see that in a mobile media when you start to see the downloads, and you
mhm.
start to see those downloads also turn into just customer engagement on the platform. And so we started to see that, and those are things that we look for. And it's, yeah, an exciting journey with pray.com too. And it's definitely one to follow if you're not already, but it sounds like you got a chance to see it.
For sure. I know that they're like the leader in the face space. Um, I wonder, so like when it comes to, I think the other part is like, nowadays, like I feel like creating a pray.com, like nowadays they have a lot more um moat because they have been here as like the market leader for a while. But I think when they first starting, how do you think about like a company like this could build a moat since like there's since technology is not the driven factor here, I feel like a lot of people
Mhm.
could build an app. But like I wonder like how do you think, and then there's like other people may build app in the same category. How
Yeah.
do you evaluate the market leader part? And I feel like another thing is like I see more and more subscription app started going, they're trying to go TikTok viral. So basically like they
Mhm.
go really hard on the TikTok strategies. But how do you think about like Pray.com did right to kind of like the distribution very early on?
Yeah, no, we think that's actually how we think about every single one of our companies, is how can we build that moat and make it as large as we can and also as quickly as we can. And so I think for us, it's someone here, the Glorify app is a nice experience.
Mhm.
I think for us, it's really interesting to find an app that, one, resonates. So that's
Mhm.
always, number one. I think you need to have a nice user experience. Secondly, I think for us is, how can we unlock our network and find one large partnership that can essentially unlock many users and customers? And so usually that's one like it could be one large group. And for us, we started to see those were actually the mega churches. And so for mega churches, that was one area. Secondly, we started to see, are there large ambassadors that can work with us and start to create content? And so that's where we also started, was who has a large community that we can actually reach. And so if it's not going to be us, if it's not going to be our immediate network, and maybe it's not even at our teams, who is that other ambassador that can help propel that message for us? And so again, it was thinking about who are those large faith leaders. And that's where we started to say, wow, they have hundreds of thousands and millions that we can actually reach. And so that's how we initially started. And these were global communities as well. And so that's how we've always thought about, like, how can we build that moat? How can we reach a large amount of users in a very quick, streamlined time? So I think for us, if we think about Pray.com, it was through those ambassadors. I mean, same thing again with Liquid Death. It's thinking about, we used Live Nation as that big partner. We have an esports company called Play VS, and they were going into high school sports. And so we partnered with the National Federation of High Schools, and that allowed us to reach all of the high schools within the US. And so when we think about marketing distribution or building that moat, it's how can you really think strategically to, and it might not even be necessarily, again, within your network. It might not even be a traditional path that you might think of, but who can reach millions of users very quickly. And so that's how we think about it, as opposed to going like individual D2C.
I totally agree. I wonder, when it comes to like thinking about the big partnerships, you mentioned about the distribution, the mega churches, or like the uh like National Federation of High Schools. Like, would you say, like, as an investor, like, do you have to build these relationships fast, or would you say it have to be coming out of your back pocket, the LP community, or like just like one of the GPs to be like, growing up with one of these leaders? How do you think about to build the relationship versus pulling from like the existing network?
Oh, it's such a great question. I think, one, obviously it is our network, our initial, and these are relationships that we've built over time. And so I think, maybe you and I have discussed, when I also was just meeting Mike Jones, and I realized that I had some connection to many of their investors, and they were my friends. These were people that I grew up with, or I'd spent time, again, kind of in the Middle East. And I think for me, these are personal relationships that were not transactional. I think over time, in maybe the passions that I've stayed connected with over the years. So I think for us, it is our network. It's also, I think, because we do have extended networks, there are many of us that can probably reach anyone quite quickly, which is great. Mike alone had a team of 1,000 people that he was managing. And so I think for us, that's been key. There's a couple of things. I think one is our network at the GP level. I think second, there's our extended network just broadly throughout the community that we've built over time. And I think thirdly, I do deep dives with our companies, our portfolio companies, on a monthly basis. And we talk through some business development opportunities. And so it's, again, thinking out of the box, where maybe it's, how do we think about flavoring companies for some of our businesses? And if it's, maybe there's a flavoring company that actually could help propel, and maybe they end up becoming investors. Oftentimes then we were working with, for example, Liquid Death, and we had the distribution arm. So they were going into the distributors had the relationships with the retailers, and it just so happened they learned about that we were raising a round for them. They wanted to be a part of it, and I think for us it was quite strategic in wanting to have them as part of the round. So I think there's a handful of different ways. But I think this also lends itself to like, how do you build a strong, healthy base, right, of investors over time? And I think that's it's spending time at conferences, being relevant, and ones that are relevant to your portfolio companies. They could be at if it's in the food and beverage industry, you're spending time networking in those spaces. You're spending time networking in the banking space. You're spending time in maybe it's distribution, supply chain logistics. I think at the end of the day, you're only as strong as your network. And I think for us, our network has been quite strong across our fund LPs, our co-investors, corporate partners. And again, like, I spend a lot of my time, because of my corporate connections, I spend time there. And these investors happen to be not only investors into funds, they could be investors into our companies, and they could also be tracking them for M&A and or some exit opportunities. So for us, it's spending time strategically, again, where you're not overextending, but also not being afraid to reach out to your network. And I think that's how I would.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I feel like one of the audience is asking some deeper questions. LinkedIn user, I don't know if it's like the same person, but there's like so many LinkedIn user here. So if you have to start over again and had no connection or money, where would you begin your path? Wow, that's deep, man.
Oh, it's such a good question. But I mean, it's also, and you and I have maybe talked about this, like core learnings, right, in our careers. And I think really, like, one is truly staying curious and experiencing as much as possible. I think if I had to think back and make those connections, it's really wanting to experience. And again, it doesn't even really have to be for money. It's where are my passions? And secondly, it's leaning towards what excites you. And so again, like, just naturally, you're going to want to spend time there. And then 3, it's how do you surround yourself with those that you can learn from. And I think it's that repetitiveness and staying consistent and learning as much as possible in that one area, and ensuring that those people that are around you are really continuing to uplift you. I think that's how you stay strong. And again, it's for us, and finding the people that can help propel you super quickly. And I think for me, I mean, if I had to say, I grew up as my father passed when I was 5. And so my mom was a single mom, and I was raised, my extended family is global. And so I think naturally it was so great for me to be able to experience, and I had the opportunity to experience life through a lens of different generations, different cultures, different perspectives. And you kind of learn the importance of what a family, community, your friends, your network, and what all of that looks like. And you start to realize that you lean on those around you, and you can learn so much. And I think life is really a life learning journey, and or life is a learning journey and consistently evolving. And so if I had to start over, if anyone else does, you lean into core to yourself, and I guess what your passions are, and you continue on that path. And I think that's what leads you.
For sure. Okay, so I want to ask like a relevant question, since I feel like you entered science as a head of investor relations, and you have helped them build the science rolling fund, and then now you're GP here. Like, why don't we talk about, like, what's your kind of like career journey like as a head of investor relations? And first of all, like, for those who are, I feel like a lot of our audience are familiar with like general VCs, like investors, like VCs, but like like, why don't you give us like a quick look on like what does investor relation entail for science, as well as like in general, like, how do you kind of like shape your day to day?
Sure. So science, we are a venture fund and studio. And so we're a traditional fund, and in VC that falls under private equity. So we're a private equity fund and traditional GP LP structure. So we are obviously the GPs, and we have LPs, which are fund investors, and they come from different from a variety of types. So from your traditional sovereigns, pension funds, and could be foundations and endowments, fund of funds, family offices, and even high net worth individuals. And so I think for us, we don't have many LPs. We have our third fund. We're going to start thinking about our next fourth fund, a repeatable process, right? We have our studio that is our operational portfolio operations arm, which is similar to, if you think like a KPR, Capstone, or Cerberus, where they're portfolio operators once they acquire a business. We're doing this on the earlier end. And then we have our fund, which has the dollars and the capital that help to fund our companies once they reach the traction. And so where I spend a lot of my time when we were thinking about investor relations, and it was how can we institutionalize the platform that we have, and that institutional lens that I started to think about was, okay, how can I tie in my Wall Street experience? And so oftentimes you're going to think about the GPLP structure. You bring in large funds and dollars who have traditional targets to meet their portfolio of returns. And again, they have many different strategies. So they'll have real estate infrastructure, so under the private markets. Some will have public equities that they're investing in. At the end of the day, those are investors who are looking to find, at times, maybe uncorrelated returns. They're finding, again, they're looking for managers. So in the same way and maybe same lens that we look at portfolio companies we want to invest in, what is our expertise? How can we help? How can we lend our expertise to these companies, and how can we bring in returns? Fund investors are looking at us in the same way, right? But they're looking at us as we are the investment. And so they're looking at the fund managers, they're looking at our team, they're looking at our track record, they're looking at the portfolio companies that underlie our portfolio, and understanding, is this going to be a long enduring business that we can help to support over the years, right? This is not going to be a one and done type company. So Science has been around since 2011. And so for us, where I spend a lot of my time, I do spend time globally, and, many times on a plane, or I'm in different cities. And it's really just understanding, who are investors that are going to align with our story, who are going to really also be partners to us. So we don't look for passive investors. We do look for active investors that are spending time with us, with our portfolio, and how can they also unlock different, and I would say this for really anyone, how can you think about, an active partnership and relationship with your investors, because these are lifelong relationships. And so can they help? And again, it doesn't have to be necessarily just for your fund or even your entire portfolio. It could just be for one. And maybe there's opportunities for them to invest into the companies. Maybe there's opportunities for them to open up their networks to help build additional relationships. And maybe there are even just finding ways for them to help support the brand because they love it, and wanting to wear the merchandise and act as ambassadors. I think there's just so many different ways.
I want to wear their merchandise is a key, key indicator for an LP relationship, and
I know it's been great, and I have to say, I really do love the LPs and partners that we've had over the years, and it's exciting to see them. I'd also say that. I really look at them as, they're humans, right? We also share different passions. And I think for us, as I'm also traveling, and it's getting to know their families, it's getting to know, even we're not immune to tragedies. And so you also get a chance, over the years, you're seeing different life cycles of their own lives. And so it's also not just, how can they help us? I think it's also how can we help them? How can we partner with them? And that's me personally, but I really value my relationships and my connections, and I always want to be helpful. And so when I think through that, it's also thinking about my different passions that I can also share with them. And and sometimes they overlap with work, and often, many times they do. But I'd say even, I'm on the board of James Beard Foundation, and I have many people who are interested in food and beverage. And then I have others, I'm also, I had going for my level 2 SOM. So again, that's kind of one tie there. Then there's also activities in sports, from tennis to snowboarding. And so I think when we think about, maybe these are activities that they themselves are interested in, or even their kids, or their friends. And I think it's also just nice bonding experiences as well. You really get to know someone when you're spending time with them. And so I think at the end of the day-to-day for me, is one, getting to know and build the relationships, and again, and more and authentically, right? These are not just transactional. And sometimes, you never know, it might lead to something down the road. I think, again, it's just spending times with those people that you can learn from and want to lift you, and just people that you really enjoy spending time with. And that's one of the reasons why I've been with Science for so long. They're family to me. And I knew when I was making that move to the West Coast, and again, I was moving back for family, I wanted a nice work home, and I wanted to, again, I found that with Science. I really want to enjoy the people that I work with. I want to support the people that I love. And that's whether it's my portfolio companies, whether it's my partners. And then thirdly, I think it's how can I stay relevant? And I think as part of that, it's just you are doing the work, right? We're building, we're also making money for our investors and for our founders. And so I think it's staying true to that and making sure that through my three hats, right? It's sourcing and investing, it's maintaining our portfolio, and then also continuing to find ways to engage our community and through marketing and events.
For sure. I want to ask more about like thinking about the exit. So I feel like one thing Science did really well is like a lot of your consumer brands actually have exits. So I feel like a lot of the consumer brands is like when like I was looking at the consumer brands in China, I feel like one of the big fear is like, okay, what if they never exit? So like they will just keep selling on online
Mhm.
platforms. And
Sure.
then like, like I feel like in the US, like we can see the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world that actually getting acquired by like a big traditional company. But how do you think about the company that are like they're doing well on its own, like they're selling some stuff, but like, you know, um, how do you vet their exit strategy? Would you actually introduce them to like a potential buyer, see if there's any synergy there early on to like be convinced that like this would be a good company partner versus how do you think about the possibility of returning the fund since we're talking about like institutionalize the fund.
Sure. So twofold. I think one is we spend a lot of time with corporates, even not even just to invest, but also thinking about what is in their R&D, what is in their innovation pipeline. And I think for us, it helps to think about how we're going to build companies, because at the end of the day, if those are areas that they're interested in, those oftentimes will be companies that they'll want to track for M&A because they'll want to have them as in their portfolio. So I think for us, it's okay, how do we align ourselves with those corporates to build companies that they actually want and that they know they will want to invest in, and they know they will want to acquire because they need that as part of their portfolio. So I think that's one lens, is we're building companies we know will have that opportunity to exit. We are a venture fund, so we have the traditional funds that are 7 to 10 year, timeframes. And so that's definitely one. There are opportunities, though, certainly, when I think this is really where our studio comes in, where we're spending time with our companies early on before we even invest. And we're saying, is this actually even a viable business? And oftentimes we can know that fairly quickly by spending time with the founders, spending time testing and iterating very quickly, and then making sure we let those go very quickly. Because if we know something is not going to be a venture investable or a exited company, we will know it's not going to be for our fund. So we always invest with that lens that we have a path to a potential exit or IPO. That said, I think from a company perspective, we won't prematurely connect them. I think what's so nice about our team, we have our entire partnership that will come in at various stages of the company. And so we have Tom Dare and Rob, who are on our finance team, who are, CFO, and are helping to track that business, making sure that they get to viability. And Greg, who's another one of our partners and founders of Science, thinking about structurally, is this the right business? Are they set up appropriately? Mike, whom you obviously know and is like a visionary and sits on a handful of the boards for our companies, is, again, making sure, are they executing on their vision? and Peter, thinking about business development. Okay, now at what point can we start connecting them to build out their customer base, maybe investors? And then as I think about now they're at a stage once we've invested, are there ways to unlock different partnerships? And again, we won't prematurely connect them because we don't want them to be distracted. We want them to build a large business and we want to get them on track. And I think that's the beauty of science, where we know we've been through it, we're seasoned experts. And so we want to say, okay, we will unlock our services and our network at the appropriate time. And at the end of the day too, we'll run the fundraise for them and we'll do it fairly quickly. Again, because we know who the right partners, back to your original question, at what point are we connecting with, and who do we know we want to connect with? And I think it's just over time we're getting to know the interests on both ends. So
For sure. I feel like that's super valuable to like unlock the right people at the right time. As you mentioned, like, I feel like a lot of business are asking for introduction or like trying to get into blah blah's radar. But the problem is like they're maybe prematurely or like trying to ask for the wrong thing from the wrong people. I think having the right network and then knows how to pitch to everyone and like getting people's interests aligned is really important. So like since you're the expert in investor relations, I wonder, since like we have some listeners that are starting their own fund or like, it's more towards like the earlier stage in their fund establishment journey. So I wonder, how do you think about like, do you go after, let's say, the mega LP first, or would you go after whoever will invest you first? Because I've heard about like two different school of theories. Like one part is like, hey, if you don't have a lead investor, like nobody else is gonna come in, because people think this won't exist. But if you don't keep pitching everyone, like if you just go after the lead investor, your pitch is not ready. So how do you think about like, you know, in terms of like putting together the cap table for a fund or for a startup? Like how do you think about that?
yeah, I mean, you mentioned there are different schools of thoughts. I think that it's what I always guide people around is who resonates with your story. I think again, it goes back to you really want to be around good people and people
Mhm,
who also want to support you. And I think that you'll find you'll find that there are many people out there with capital. And again, it's do you, and you have to also be clear, do you want passive capital where you're just taking in dollars, or do you want capital that are actually going to help support you on the journey? I think that the larger traditional names certainly are ones that you should build relationships with, because over time they will be core and key to obviously structuring and creating a more institutional fund. But at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all. I think are there people that resonate with you as your team? So I think it's making sure that they're aligned with the team, they're aligned with your strategy, making sure you're asking the qualifying questions initially. Are they investing in, and I would say these are probably the kind of key categories if you're looking for investors. It's the qualifying questions like, do you invest in venture? Do you invest in this stage? What are the last investments that you've made in that space? What is the dollar check size amount that you've invested? And I think you're honest, right? I think you also don't want to spend time, again, just beating your head. And I think there's enough there. I think you can also being extremely friendly with investors. And I think, again, you're building that network, and maybe if it's not a fit for them, that's okay. But maybe there's other relationships that they could explore. So I'd say I would think about it from when they're building. You're also looking for the right people for you. And I think that's how you should look at it. And also making sure that you have everything in line, you have your team, you have your track record, and you're pretty buttoned up, and everything else kind of speaks for itself. So, but I'm happy to share any additional insights. Obviously, I know this is just a short conversation.
For sure. I feel like this deserves its own episode just because I feel like there's so much nuance to like approaching investors, whether you're a founder or GP. I feel like in the end of the game, even LPs are raising money. So I feel like the most insane thing I've observed last year was like I would have be at an event that even LPs are raising money from LPs.
True.
So it's
That's
crazy.
true.
So the cycle never stops. You may
I
thought it
agree.
will end, but it will never end. It's
I
crazy.
agree. I agree. I
Okay,
agree.
so I want to be mindful of the time, and we have a quick 1 minute fire round for you. So, what's your favorite book?
Oh, the 4 Agreements.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Mm. Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I'd say Mike Jones.
Who we'll send him this clip, but who who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh my gosh. Oh, this is such a good question. Oh my God, who would I invite to my dinner party? Maybe Francis Mallman. I mean, he's a friend, but also super cool, fun.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Tennis courts.
Oh, wow, you're so athletic. I cannot play
And
tennis. I
maybe, yeah, snowboarding this season, but
love that.
definitely tennis
Wow.
courts. I play tennis, so
Wow. Oh my God. Like the last time I played tennis, literally a ball hit onto my head. So I'm
no.
traumatized. But I love playing it like just like as a sports, like or like exercise, but I cannot be serious about it. I'll die on the court. But well, Priscilla, thank you so much for coming to the show. It was such a fun conversation.
Oh, Grace, so great. Love chatting. Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Let me quickly end stream.